on Islam, the second most popular religion in the world. And Farah and any other Muslims who are here, we especially welcome you today, and I especially welcome your corrections, because I don't know much about this religion. I don't know a lot that is pretty intrinsic to Islam. But given the current political hysteria, the points I want to make today, while they are simple, they are important. My main message is what Farah said, that Islam is a rich, complex, diverse. Muslims are diverse in their beliefs, their attitudes, their culture, and lumping together 1.5 billion people, 22% of the human race, and labeling them as dangerous potential terrorists is ugly, invalid, and unethical. So my voice is just one of a rising chorus of people beginning to stand up and speak out for decency and integrity regarding this. My mentor Joe Schumann spoke last year. His words, "Demagoguery and xenophobia in high places are reaching a feverish pitch not witnessed since the McCarthy era. What we are experiencing in this election cycle is a politics of fear, which employs scapegoating in order to garner popular support for those seeking to be leader of the free world. It is morally repugnant and politically very dangerous." Now, there are many reasons why there is this rise in hostility towards Islam. Some of the intolerance comes from the human tendency to fear and marginalize difference. Some of it comes from centuries of religious competition and warfare. And some obviously comes from the horrific 9/11 attacks. But a lot of today's distortion and hysteria is because our president whipped up bigotry with his campaign mantra, radical Islamic terrorists. He fanned the flames of intolerance by basically saying that it was better in the good old days when America was white, great, and Christian. Trump leveraged this reactionary historical myth, lie, that we've always been a Christian nation. The myth marginalizes Muslims. This week I attended a humanist gathering at the Washington Ethical Society. We went down to the museum, which houses the Religious Freedom Institute, where we met Nate Walker, their new director. And many of you may know Nate as a wonderful, personable minister who was minister at First Unitarian. He is now the director of the Religious Freedom Institute. And Nate explained to us how purposeful the historical distortion has become in today's political climate. Many have ramped up efforts to pit white, Christian good guys against swarthy, evil Muslims. And Nate points out how much these bigots ignore things like William Penn's work, The Great Cause of Liberty of Conscience, which promoted religious tolerance in this commonwealth. They ignored Thomas Jefferson, who wrote that the state took, quote, within the mantle of its protection, the Jew and the Gentile, the Christian and the Mohammedan, the Hindu and the infidel of every denomination. Even infidels is protected by this government. Bigots ignore the Constitution's ban on religious tests for holding office. And it's not by accident that the First Amendment has religious freedom, without which the Constitution would have never been ratified. Reactionaries forget the 1797 Treaty of Tripoli, which explicitly said that we are not a Christian nation. That was approved unanimously by the U.S. Senate of our founding fathers. None of this makes any difference to an administration determined to manipulate bigotry for political purposes. And it worked, didn't it? Even so, some popular freethinkers, like Sam Harris and Bill Maher, also demonstrate anti-Muslim bigotry. When the New York Times journalist Nicholas Kristof was on Bill Maher's show, he was taken aback by the intolerant and ignorant attitudes of Harris and Maher. And he found himself siding with Ben Affleck as a defender of tolerance. Affleck called Maher and Harris's comments gross and racist. But when celebrities join fundamentalists and they join with politicians, in smearing Muslims, it can start what the humanist dean of my class, Kendall Gibbons, called a process of dehumanization and the manufacture of mortal enemies. That kind of talk gives cover to people like Michael Anton, an NSC advisor, he's the current senior NSC advisor to this White House, who blithely dismisses Islam as, quote, incompatible with the modern West. So Farag is incompatible with the modern West. Kendall pointed out that creating enemies for political purposes has been going on for a long time. She says it's what they said about the Jews, about the Japanese, about the Native Americans, the heathens, the Africans. It was never true in the end, but it has always served the purpose of the moment well enough. We must oppose that purpose. Muslim neighbors and fellow citizens face daily indignities and fear for their life and their livelihood. We can just start with flying while Muslim. Have you heard that term? It happens constantly. The Guardian's reporter Homa Khalidi documented examples of harassment from men being escorted off of a plane by police because their seatmate saw them texting in their native language, in Arabic. A young newlywed couple was taken off a plane because she had a head covering and dared to speak in Arabic. Many are unfairly grilled by security officers, they're searched by police, they're hampered from getting travel visas. Hate crimes against Muslims have risen over the last couple of years, especially in the last 6 months. You may remember last year in Philadelphia here, a pig's head was found at the door of the Al-Aqsa Islamic Society. And immediately after Trump called for a ban on Muslims, crimes of this type spiked in this country. Mosques received anti-Muslim, pro-Trump letters threatening genocide. One letter said, quote, Muslims were the children of Satan and the president was going to do to you, Muslims, what Hitler did to the Jews. Evangelical leader Billy Graham III, who spoke at Trump's inaugural, fueled the conspiracy myth that Muslims were taking over America from within. This is a popular conspiracy myth. A couple of years ago, he declared that the government had been infiltrated by Muslims. Robinson now says, it's Pat Robinson who published a story saying that Satan was guiding Freemasons and the Illuminati and the Trilateral Commission, now says that opposing Trump is opposing the will of God. But I think if Muslims have infiltrated our country, they're not doing a very good job at keeping anti-Muslim hysteria from reaching fever pitch. It's not easy to be a Muslim in government in the United States today. There are actually relatively few. There are no senators who are Muslims. There are only 2 representatives, one being Keith Ellison. I read a poignant article in February's Atlantic magazine about a young woman named Rumana Ahmed. She wrote it. Her parents came from Bangladesh in 1978. And she became the only hijab-wearing Muslim in the White House. She was welcomed by President Obama. She was a National Security Council liaison. And she intended to stay on in the Trump White House just to show them the dedication and commitment of Muslims. She could only last 8 days. When she left, she told her senior NSC communications boss, Michael Anton, I told him I had to leave because it was an insult walking into this country's most historic building every day under an administration that is working against and vilifying everything I stand for as an American and as a Muslim. I told him that the administration was attacking the basic tenets of democracy. But this administration seems immune to civic lessons. They're immune to facts, like Islam is diverse. And one technique that they use for maintaining the ignorance in our country is that they argue that there's only one true Islam. Billy Graham said, true Islam cannot be practiced in this country. And such phrasing is blind to the diversity of Islam. There's a website called the Faith Freedom, created by ex-Muslims helping Muslims leave their religion. Now, I know all religions can be abusive. There is a need for people of all faiths to be given ways to leave their religion, should that be where their heart and their conscience calls them. But Faith Tree describes Islam as, quote, a religion of hate, of terror, of war. It concludes, quote, Islam is a cult created by a psychopath. It cannot be reformed, it must be eradicated. Whatever your opinion is on Muhammad and the history of Islam, this sort of talk misses the diversity and richness of the world of Islam. So let me go into that a little bit. I'm going to rely on a 2012 Pew study, which was called The World's Muslims, Unity and Diversity, and it points out that the 1.5 billion Muslims are united in a belief in God and in the Prophet Muhammad, and they share various practices like fasting during Ramadan and almsgiving. But 38,000 face-to-face interviews in this study in over 80 languages also show that there are widely differing views revolving religious commitment, openness to multiple interpretations of the faith, and aspects of various sects and movements. Unfortunately for many Americans, myself included, we know little about the demographics of Islam. So I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. You're not going to have to say anything in public, but I want you to think. Can you think of what you think are the number 1, 2, and 3 most populated majority Muslim countries? Which 3 countries have the most Muslims? Just think for a moment. Yeah, you probably know better than most. All right, here it is. Bids are in. Indonesia boasts the most Muslims. 209 million Muslims live there, about 13% of the world's Muslims. The second most populated country with Muslims is India, with 176 million Muslims. That's about 11%. The third is Pakistan, with 167 million Muslims, about 10%. Followed by Bangladesh, Nigeria, Egypt, Iran, Turkey, Algeria, and Morocco. Way down on the list, with 3.3 million Muslims, 0.3% of Muslims is the United States. Now you can have different reactions to this list, but I'm going to offer 2 of mine that came to mind. First of all, with only 0.3 of the world's Muslims in this country, it's no wonder we're so ignorant about the diversity of Islam. Secondly, Muslims are spread across Asia and Africa, in contrast to the common myth that all Muslims live in the Middle East in Arabic countries. Now, personally, I grew up with westernized myths, from Lawrence of Arabia to cartoon stereotypes, right? So I've been bathed in the ignorance about this religion. In high school, I learned a little bit more. I learned about the division between Shia and Sunni. Many of you know this division. After the death of Muhammad in 632 Common Era, the dispute arose about leadership transition. The Sunnis, loyal to the descendants of Muhammad, make up about 80% of all Muslims. Shias contend that leadership is invested in current religious leaders around the world, Ayatollahs. And while these 2 groups do occasionally have violent conflicts, in most cases they live together in harmony. Greater friction occurs between a very small group of Muslims who identify as Wahhabis and the rest of the Muslim world. Accounting for less than 1% of all Muslims, the Wahhabis get a disproportionate amount of attention because of their extremism. They are the official state-sponsored religion of Saudi Arabia. And Wahhabis are criticized by many Muslims for being overly fundamentalist and sectarian and puritanical. I recommend a book by Maria Menakal called The Ornament of the World. And she points out a similarity between the Wahhabis and the intolerant right-wing fanatics in this country. She says, both Islamophobes and Wahhabis seek to erase from history the evidence of centuries of pluralism within Islam and of the coexistence between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Now, this erasure allows political ideologues in this country, along with ultra-Orthodox Saudis, to argue that there's only one true Islam. Many right-wingers might say that my bleeding liberal heart blinds me to the realities, so let me talk a little bit about the realities that are ugly and dangerous. There's much oppression in some Muslim countries. Oppression of women is particularly strong. According to the World Economic Forum, of the 10 most anti-women countries, 9 are in majority Muslim nations. In Kuwait, women still cannot vote. In the more fundamentalist Islamic State, Christians, Baha'is, Sufis, and other religious minorities are persecuted. And of course, terrorism does bubble up, in part from these powerful Islamic extremist groups. But it is wrong to equate extremism with Islam. In some ways, extremism is more a product of the Middle East. I think Fareed Zakaria is very brilliant. Don't agree with him always. But he says that the real problem is not Islam, it's the Middle East. Due to a combination of forces, many so-called democracies of the Middle East are autocratic or corrupt. Zakaria, he advocates actually for what he calls an Islamic reformation that would support pluralism and tolerance and liberty. And while there are many aspects then of Muslim world that we can critique, it's important not to single out Islam either. I mean, people always say, look at how violent the Quran is. And you know the comeback, read the Bible. If you want to compare historical records, just in the 20th century, it's not the Islamic world that can be blamed for crimes against humanity as easily as the Christian, Nazi, communist Europe and the Buddhist, Taoist, Hindu, atheist Asia, both places which set the record for human slaughter. So let me turn to some positive trends within the diversity that is Islam. David Schaefer, who was a speaker at my Humanist Institute class, noted the remarkable adaptability of Islam that people sometimes forget. He talked about the fact that English and French was incorporated into the educational system in many of the colonial countries very smoothly, and that Islam has adapted to both modern capitalism and Marxism in ways that people are surprised. David pointed out that there are humanitarian elements within Islam that many Westerners don't realize, like the alms giving, that mirrors a lot of liberal Western sympathies for the marginalized. But even more fundamentally, David pointed out 2 concepts, and I might get the pronunciation correct. Ijtihad, which means creative interpretation, and ikhtilaf, which means diversity of interpretation, that flourishes in many Muslim countries, even regarding the Quran. While Islam espouses submission to the will of God, that does not mean for many Muslims that they have to think the same. Experimentation and exploration are encouraged, and passages of the Quran are emphasized that stress that there can be no compulsion in religion. While it's true that some intolerant fundamentalists have forgotten that rule against compulsion, remember that most people, as Farah talked about, most people opposing Muslim fundamentalists are Muslims. Including those who die.
That are killed by, let's say, ISIS or Daesh, are religious.
Funny you should mention that, because the University of Maryland's Global Terrorism Database shows that between 2001 and 2017, of the 167,000 people who were victims to terrorism, 98% of them occurred outside of the United States and Western Europe. Most of the victims being Muslim. Muslims defending modernism and free speech and freedom of religion risk their lives. Muslim martyrs are harassed, threatened, raped, imprisoned for exercising liberty and preaching tolerance. The best known is Malala, delightful young Pakistani woman who was shot by the Taliban for educating girls. These Muslim activists deserve our support, not our stereotypes. A lot of the Islamic world is overlooked by those peddling those stereotypes. I mentioned the most populous majority Muslim country is Indonesia. That's rarely mentioned in the news today, talking about Islam. The 209 Muslims there are less sectarian than those in the Middle East. The division between Shia and Sunni don't even mean that much to Muslims in Indonesia. Only 26% of them call themselves Sunnis. 56 said they are, quote, just a Muslim. Muslims from Eastern Europe are probably the most secular. Only 56% of them, Eastern Europe, they're the least pious, according to a Pew poll. They don't consider their religion the center of their lives. Morocco and Tunisia, countries with remarkably rich intellectual lives and respect for secularism, accept multiple interpretations of Islam. Even in the United States, where there's only 0.3% of all Muslims in the world, there's diversity here. It's incredible. I'm just going to point out two groups. Teaching history for 25 years, I was fascinated with the Nation of Islam. Founded around 1930. This Nation of Islam was particularly important to those impoverished, in poverty, hooked on drugs. Elijah Muhammad led a movement that gave the life and pride back to thousands and thousands of Americans in this country. And leaders of oppressive white governments in the South and the North condemned the Nation of Islam because they were separatists, without considering the context of white supremacy in which it grew. Most people know that Malcolm X was a devotee of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. More will talk about his semi-conversion when he went to Mecca on the Hajj. In his famous letter from Mecca, Malcolm X describes an overwhelming sense of connectedness with Muslims of all different types when he visited Mecca in 1964. He said, "Never have I witnessed such sincere hospitality and overwhelming spirit of true brotherhood as is practiced by people of all colors and races here in the ancient Holy Land. For the past week, I have been utterly speechless and spellbound by the graciousness I have seen displayed around me by people of all colors." Malcolm X said that the trip forced him to, quote, "rearrange much of my thought patterns previously held." He said, "I've always been a man who tries to face facts and to accept the reality of life as new experience and new knowledge unfolds. I've always kept an open mind, which is necessary to the flexibility that must go hand in hand with every form of intelligent search for truth." Where is our intelligent search for truth? It's not correct. X's position cost him his life, but his dedication to a universalism and a liberation that Islam gave him is evidence of the diversity of Islam. So too are Sufi communities throughout the United States, including Bawa Muhaddin Fellowship in Overbrook. I hope to visit that center this spring with a member of that fellowship, Jacob Hurwitz. And Layla, I just want to say I send my thoughts to you and your family, because Jacob is married to Layla's daughter. Dr. Ali Bird's, which was on the front page of the March 6th Daily News, you may have seen it. The story was actually talking about how many immigrants aren't going to their doctors because they're afraid of being deported. Well, last week I had the chance to talk to Jacob on the phone, and he told me about Sufism, which is condemned by some ultra-Orthodox Muslims as not being true Islam, but is considered a legitimate expression of Islam by the vast majority of Muslims. And it's not really a distinct sect, because you have Sunni and Shia Sufis. It's more a way of understanding religion, is how Jacob told me. Philosophically, Sufism focuses on the inner life and mysticism, but as a lived experience for Jacob, for him, it was an experience of inclusion and tolerance and peace. He even said that U.S. policymakers support Sufism around the globe as a counter to the extremism of the Wahhabism. Sufism was at the Ethical Society. When Javad gave his talk, he mentioned the Persian poet Rumi. The artwork, massive, upstairs. Beautiful artwork. Much of it drawn from the literature of Rumi, a Sufi. We're unaware of that richness. Our heads are all filled with these stereotypes, and we're less aware of the incredible complexity and diversity of Islam. So again, I recommend The Ornament of the World by Maria Mencal, because she talks about centuries, from the 9th century till basically the time Columbus left. The Iberian Peninsula in Spain had an incredibly flourishing community of Christians and Muslims and Jews. And while Mencal's book is a little bit romantic, even the conservative National Review recommended it. Stephen Schwartz, a reviewer of that book, said, throughout the course of Islamic history, the extraordinary power of Muslim monotheism has driven some to fanatical excess. Yet its compassionate essence, let me repeat that, its compassionate essence has moderated such tendencies. The Wahhabi extremism on display in Saudi Arabia could never survive among the Andalusian Muslims of Morocco, or the Sufis of Uzbekistan, or the Malaysian traditionalists. Muslims today must find their way forward, but they should do so in the context of a global society based on religious coexistence. Jews and Christians can play a role in this quest, as they did in Spain a millennium ago. End quote. That's the National Review, folks. I hope our nation recaptures the spirit of tolerance evident in that history. It's not going to happen without us. Arthur Dobrin, an ethnic culture leader in Long Island, talked about the fact that we have these different narratives of American history. We have one that America is for Americans first, for people that look white, that speak English without an accent. Dobrin says we really should embrace a more pragmatic, messy history. He says, this is what really happens. One group after another takes up residence, and the group gets mixed up with others. Some groups get absorbed, some are integrated, some of the groups are amalgamated, and some keep to themselves. Some groups accept each other groups, while some only tolerate each other. But each group acknowledges the others as true Americans. The slogan, I lift up my lamp beside the golden door, even as the torch of liberty flickers now and then. We have to reclaim that American story. We have to declare that that story condemns bigotry and intolerance and xenophobia. My brother John Taft spoke here last year on this stage as part of our program on capitalism. And he teamed up in Minnesota with Representative Keith Ellison in May of last year to take out a full-page ad in a very typical down-home Minnesotan way. So I want to read you the text of that ad. It would be un-Minnesotan. If you're reading this, you're probably a Minnesotan. Hop up north and snow days mean something to you. So do the values we're raised with. Everyday, sleeve-worn goodness, courage, and kindness. Though we may be a soft-spoken bunch, we know better than to be silent or still in the face of bigotry shown to Muslims. Our fellow Minnesotans. Every intolerant social post, every prejudiced comment aimed at Muslims needs a response. Your response. We must lead people to a place of tolerance and understanding. We must come together as a diverse and vibrant community. Our values don't take days off, and neither should we. If you're Minnesotan, you know this to be true. We know better. We can't be tricked into betraying our values. It would be so very un-Minnesotan of us. Well, it's un-American to condemn the Islamic world. It's unethical not to welcome into the world the talents, the joys, the compassion, and the humanity of our Muslim neighbors, friends, and fellow citizens. Thank you very much.